Unprecedented military activity is taking place in the eastern Mediterranean. Apart from the US, European countries are deploying their most prized ships to the region one by one. Some of these ships, whose names you will learn shortly, are capable of single-handedly disrupting all of Iran's plans. There are several reasons for these deployments, but the latest one is particularly noteworthy. Turkey, which has NATO's second strongest army, was targeted by Iranian ballistic missiles for the second time in recent days. Moreover, when this move was made, the United States, the world's largest military power, had already established a massive military ring in the Middle East. The USS Gerald Ford and Abraham Lincoln aircraft carriers were in the region in all their glory. Numerous advanced air defense batteries accompanying them had also turned their barrels to the sky. However, the Tehran administration did not hesitate to take all these great risks and carry out those dangerous border violations. An Iranian ballistic missile passed over Iraq and Syria on March 9th and entered Turkish airspace directly for the second time. Just a few days earlier on March 4th, Tehran's first ballistic missile attack against Turkey had taken place. The missile again passed through Iraqi and Syrian airspace and headed towards the Turkish province of Hatay. Both missiles were safely intercepted in the air by NATO air defense systems over the eastern Mediterranean. It was speculated that the main target of the Tehran regime in this move was the strategic Incirlik air base, which also hosts NATO forces in Turkey. Naturally, this tension paved the way for heated discussions about whether NATO's Article 5 would be triggered. The Iranian side insisted that these steps were not directly targeting Turkey. However, following these two major violations in quick succession, Turkey finally said enough and began sounding the alarm bells in the region at the highest level. The first and clearest strategic defense step was echoed in Cyprus. The Ankara government announced to the world that it had sent 6 F-16 fighter jets to northern Cyprus. It is known that these fighter jets will likely be actively deployed against possible ballistic missile activity in the region. This powerful news will likely dispel much of the chaos Iran has been trying to create in the Mediterranean. As you know, Iran's drones, such as the Shahed 136, fly at low altitudes and slow speeds to evade radar detection. These inexpensive but effective systems pose serious risks to strategic islands such as Cyprus. However, the F-16s deployed to the field can detect these drones at a very early stage by conducting continuous patrol flights in the TRNC airspace. Moreover, F-16s can also escort commercial or military flights to the TRNC, preventing potential infiltrations. So, what if Iran persists in its critical mistake in the region? Despite all this, if Tehran's attempts do not stop, Turkey has a much bigger card to play. You'll remember that formidable power, the TCG Anadolu, which earned high praise in NATO exercises from our previous videos. Now imagine this unstoppable technology flying in full operational mode in the warm waters of the Mediterranean near the Iranian border. This floating fortress, the world's first armed UAV carrier, will completely turn the tide. But NATO doesn't leave things to chance. Military experts are loudly calling for NATO to urgently adopt joint naval defense forces against Iran because Iran has shown the audacity to directly target not only Turkey, but also an EU country. We are referring to the infamous Shahed 136 attacks on the British Royal Air Force Base RAF Akroy in Cyprus. In fact, following these alarming waves of attacks, the European Union quickly realized the gravity of the situation and went on high alert. UK Defense Secretary John Healey flew to the island on March 5th to see the situation for himself. Immediately afterwards, the highly equipped destroyer HMS Dragon majestically anchored in the eastern Mediterranean. In fact, the British side did not stop there. In recent days, it was officially announced that the massive aircraft carrier HMS Prince of Wales was also being prepared for deployment to this region. France, another major European power, has not remained silent in the face of this crisis. The Paris government, like London, became one of the parties rapidly increasing defensive measures against Iran in the Mediterranean. In fact, France has risen to the position of the country, giving the most determined and harsh response on the ground. The Paris administration dispatched the famous Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier and a massive fleet consisting of 10 warships to the eastern Mediterranean. In a last-minute development, Italy and Spain sent warships to accompany the French aircraft carrier strike group in the eastern Mediterranean. The Italian Navy had already demonstrated its presence in the region by sending a destroyer and 2 fully equipped frigates in recent days. The main purpose of this impressive fleet was to ensure the safe reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, which was in danger of being closed. President Emmanuel Macron even visited Charles de Gaulle in the Mediterranean on March 9th while it was on active duty. Macron made a remarkable helicopter landing on the ship and met with French naval personnel. He then gave a speech emphasizing France's defense mission. The mission Macron undertook was the most critical part of the large-scale maritime control strategy developed against Iran. The French leader's statements did not stop there. The rest of his speech on the ship was extremely clear, uncompromising, and diplomatic. Macron used the following words: "We are currently establishing a purely defensive mission. Our primary goal is to ensure the gradual reopening of the Strait of Hormuz by providing safe escort to container ships." This is an entirely peaceful defense mission, but it is of vital importance to the global economy. As can be understood from this harsh statement, France is keeping both its military deterrence and diplomatic retaliation channels open to the fullest. Defensive measures taken against this missile and drone crisis ignited by Iran in the Mediterranean were spreading like wildfire within the European Union. The Netherlands also made its presence felt in this wave. The Netherlands confirmed that its air defense and command frigate HNLMS Everson would be deployed in the eastern Mediterranean until the beginning of April to support the defense of Cyprus and allied region. A striking move that caught attention during this process came from the Greek front. The Athens administration did not remain a spectator to this development and took swift action. It announced that it had immediately sent 2 F-16 fighter jets and 2 fully equipped frigates to southern Cyprus. The names given to these frigates were highly symbolic and laden with meaning. Kimon and Sara. These names came from historical heroes of the 1821 Greek War of Independence. The message was quite clear. Greece was seeking to revive its historical role in the region. Not only Greece, but Pakistan also contributed to this multinational security coalition. Pakistan participated in this alliance with elite naval infantry and a powerful logistics support vessel. This massive multinational presence created unprecedented psychological and military pressure on the Tran administration. The Ankara government saw all these international naval maneuvers and accelerated its military deployments to make Cyprus and especially the eastern Mediterranean a safer region. One of the systems Turkey deployed to the island in this context was the Azulen-made 40mm physical destruction vehicle. This system was seen advancing towards strategic points in northern Cyprus, particularly around Irkun Airport. The protective mechanism in the images uses 40mm atom particle ammunition. When a targeted Iranian drone enters a range of approximately $700, this system creates a veritable wall of steel in the air consisting of thousands of shrapnel fragments. This means that Iran's Shahed 136 or smaller kamikaze UAVs can be easily detected on radar and neutralized the moment they attempt to approach the island. On the other hand, Turkey's defense measures are not limited to this. The island's land forces also made a strong showing. Modernized ACV-15T1 armored combat vehicles belonging to the Turkish armed forces make an imposing passage on civilian roads. These camouflaged, technologically advanced steel behemoths are seen as only a small reflection of the 40,000-strong military force on the island. It is as if a very clear message is being sent to the Tran administration. If you take one more step, you will not only find missiles in the sky, you will encounter a complete armored wall. The Ankara government's tough and decisive steps do not end there. The real strategic shockwave directed at Thrawn is rising from the east of Turkey. The Turkish Ministry of Defense is making a very quick decision to protect the Keçik NATO radar base. An advanced Patriot air defense battery is being deployed to Matia immediately. This move means putting up an impenetrable shield of fire, literally in front of the eyes, that will see Iran's ballistic missiles while they are still beyond the border. Why are we so sure? Because Patriot systems can instantly detect and track ballistic missiles from distances of 100 to 150 kilometers. This advanced technology shield works in full integration with the Keçik radar base, providing very early warning for missiles launched from Iran. This inter-ISTEM integration increases the Patriot's response time by a critical 10 to 15 seconds. Furthermore, this system works in conjunction with Turkey's domestic and powerful air defense systems such as Hisar. The combination of all these elements means a massive protective shield that will completely nullify Iran's air attack salvos. So looking at the whole picture, we see a very clear and flawless game of geostrategic chess being played in the region. While Thrawn moves its pawns, Turkey takes down the kings. The outcome seems inevitable, doesn't it? You have a massive ammunition depot in front of you, ready to move at any moment. You, on the other hand, are waiting right across from that depot with only a small spark in your hand. This is precisely the kind of risky scenario that gives Iran the audacity to target Turkey with successive ballistic missiles. So how does Iran fare in the face of all these joint defense measures? In fact, the Tan administration was militarily cornered. The Alvan-class frigates, the most trusted ships of the Iranian Navy, palled in comparison to the grandeur of the giant American aircraft carriers. The two super aircraft carriers currently anchored in the region had virtually reduced Iran's deterrence at sea to zero. In fact, according to the latest announcements from Washington, more than 50 Iranian warships, including a large unmanned aerial vehicle carrier, had been strategically neutralized. In addition to this weakness at sea, the picture in Iran's airspace was even more grim. The F-14 Tomcat and MiG-29 aircraft, which formed the backbone of the Iranian Air Force, were unfortunately outdated technology from the 1970s and 80s. These older generation aircraft had almost no chance of holding their own against modern NATO fighter jets. The situation of the ground forces was not much different from that of the air and naval forces. Iran's tank fleet consisted mainly of old Patton tanks from the 1960s and Chieftain models from the 1970s. These cumbersome armored vehicles were extremely vulnerable against today's modern anti-tank systems. The real nightmare for the Thrawn regime lies in the geostrategic equation compounded by this technological backwardness in military power. A glance at the map paints a very bleak picture for Iran. To its west stands NATO's unshakable power, Turkey. To its north is Russia, but the Moscow administration is currently immersed in deep silence in the face of the crisis. Pakistan, located to its east, definitely does not support Iran's aggressive stance towards the Gulf countries and Turkey. When you look south, you encounter the massive shadow of the U.S. Navy in the waters of the Persian Gulf. In short, Iran is literally surrounded by a powerful ring on all sides. Amidst this equation, the geopolitical role assumed by Turkey is gaining golden importance with each passing day. From the outset of the crisis, Ankara has been careful to keep diplomatic channels with Iran open to the fullest extent. However, following a series of dangerous border violations, it has rightly maximized its military deterrence on the ground. So, looking at the current situation, we are witnessing a fundamental realignment of power balances in the Middle East. On this massive global chessboard, every country is making careful calculations to place its pieces on the most advantageous squares. So, do you think any unconventional move Iran might make from this point on will serve any purpose other than accelerating its own strategic collapse? It appears that the Tehran administration is about to fall into the deep strategic pit it has dug for itself. And this time, the world does not seem content to merely watch. Predicting what will happen in the next act of this unique global power struggle is no longer that difficult. Believe me, if Iran does not accept the terms of reconciliation that Trump expects after the joint operations launched by the U.S. and Israel, the waters will become even more heated. This stubborn resistance will likely keep the region occupied for much longer with new waves of operations. At present, there are no signs of any moderation from the Thrawn regime. On the contrary, warnings that will further escalate tensions have been issued one after another by the Iranian Foreign Ministry and senior military commanders. This is a dangerous stance that could fundamentally affect not only Iran's fate, but that of the entire Middle East. It is precisely at this point of tension that Turkey has taken a key position following its recent ironclad defense measures against Iran. Ankara is seen as the most logical and powerful diplomatic bridge for restoring the shaken stability in the region. If a diplomatic table is to be set, the Ankara government can very naturally and successfully take on this mediating role. Remember, during the difficult process between Russia and Ukraine, the whole world saw how determined and persistent President Erdogan was in the peace negotiations. Now, Turkey can prepare for a brand new diplomatic role in preventing Iran from becoming further isolated and putting an end to these dangerous missile launches. However, it seems that there is still some way to go before this peace table is set up. This is because Iran has decided to cut the lifeline of the global economy instead of sitting down at the table. The Strait of Hormuz. Iran is threatening to completely paralyze the daily flow of millions of barrels of oil by mining that narrow strait. In the last 24 hours, exactly 10 Iranian mine-laying boats were caught red-handed and destroyed in the Strait of Hormuz. But that's not the most shocking detail. Things are getting really weird on the Washington front. While the world's largest military power is flexing its muscles across the ocean, statements coming from the Oval Office seem to be competing with each other. U.S. President Donald Trump appearing before cameras and delivering messages of victory is also signaling new attacks. The reason for this may be that in Trump's eyes, Iran has not yet become a risk-free entity. Perhaps the Tan regime's mind-laying maneuvers in the Strait of Hormuz could prolong the peace process. You may recall Trump's statement that he would deploy the U.S. Navy if necessary until the safe passage of all oil and cargo ships passing through the strait was ensured. Now, Iran is attempting to lock down Hormuz using this stance in the region without caring about jeopardizing global logistics. Right in the middle of this deadlock, the needle is turning back to Ankara. As Turkey tries to set up the diplomatic table, it now finds itself facing a neighbor that no longer has a regular army, but has taken global oil hostage and is suicidal. It is unclear what elements Ankara, under the NATO umbrella, will bring to the table to resolve this mine crisis. So when diplomacy loses all its power and missiles give way to silent sea mines in Hormuz, who will stop the expected major global collapse? Will it be the U.S. Navy worth hundreds of billions of dollars, or Turkey trying to hold back this fireball at its border? About 80% of the answer actually lies in the depths of that dark strait. However, the remaining critical 20% may depend on Washington's final order to withdraw or destroy. Take a moment to subscribe to our channel and don't miss the next move in this global power struggle presented by TGN. Thank you for choosing us.